imagine being a defender and you studied all week to figure out how to stop Brock Bowers, and then the Raiders line up for an entire third and fourth quarter, and Brock Bowers doesn't get a pass the entire second half. I mean, imagine being a defender. You have to kind of be like, what's going on, right? And I understand again, the defense dictates, where you throw the ball, and I understand that the Broncos defense made it a point to eliminate Brock Bowers. But come on, I mean, the Broncos defense is good, and they were bringing pressure, but hell, Pat Surtain wasn't even on the field, and you still couldn't find a way to even throw Brock the ball. I don't need Brock to catch it. I don't need him to. I don't need yak. I don't need yards after catch. I don't need touchdown. Throw the ball to Brock Bowers and just see what happens, right? Welcome back, everybody. This is Ezekiel Trezevant, Las Vegas Raiders on SI Kobe writer Ezekiel Trezevant. As always, thank you for your time. I'm very big on time and spending time wisely, especially other people's time. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining me as always. And guys, let's get right to it. I mean, we're here to talk about the Raiders, all things Raiders. Guys, I live this, I breathe this. This is what I do. This is my passion. So let's get right to it. Obviously, week 12, Raiders playing the Cowboys, Monday Night Football. Doesn't get any better than Monday Night Football. It doesn't really matter what the record is of either team. When your team gets to play on Monday Night Football, I mean, everybody gets up for it. As much as the coaches and as much as the players like to downplay the excitement of Monday night, I think it's inevitable if you love the game of football to get excited about Monday Night Football. So, again, happy game day. I love Monday Night Football. I feel like a kid all over again. As old of a man as I am, as young of a man as I am, don't get me wrong, I still love Monday Night Football. I hear that beat. I hear that intro, and my my blood gets flowing. So, again, happy Monday night to you. Happy game day to you. Obviously, Raiders versus Cowboys. And, again, let's get right to it. One thing about me, guys, and I think at this point, at 2-7, I think it's clear, especially when you look at the last 2 weeks, because in my opinion, the Raiders could have won against they could have beat the Broncos. They could have beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. So to that point, I think a lot of this game day conversation, and really most of their game day conversations, has to come down to what the Raiders do / don't do. Obviously, the other team is going to do all they can to beat the Raiders. So there's only so much to really talk about, if you ask me, in terms of what the other team is going to do and how that matchup looks. Clearly, both teams are going to do what they can to beat each other. The Raiders have to stop beating the Raiders. And I think that's where they are. And honestly, they've been for the last, I would imagine half the season, right? You go back to the Chicago game. I think that was week 4 or week 5 off the top of my head, if I'm not mistaken. And the Raiders beat the Raiders, right? And the last 2 weeks, if you ask me, the Raiders beat the Raiders. And, I think if you take an honest look at it, that's almost more frustrating than, a blowout loss than, to the Kansas City Chiefs, right? The games that they could have won that they let slip through their fingers, that is frustrating. It's frustrating to watch. I can only imagine how frustrating it is for those guys in terms of the players and coaches to be a part of. So, definitely frustrating all the way around. And I guess the goal for those guys is to not let that frustration derail things, because they have enough competition and enough battles coming their way in terms of the teams that they're playing, that they don't need to really beat up on themselves about letting those slip through their fingers. But in terms of the Cowboys game, obviously the Cowboys, I think they've had a couple of losses in a row as well, but it's really all about the Raiders. I mean, they've lost 3 games in a row. They've lost 7 out of their last 8. And I mean, you do the math, in the NFL is not about the woulda, coulda, shouldas, but woulda, coulda, shoulda. The Raiders, they could have won 2 or 3 of the games that they've lost, and that's being very impartial. That doesn't matter who you root for, who you don't root for. I mean, if the field goal, they don't miss that field goal against Chicago, that's a win right there. You go against Jacksonville, I mean, come on, they make that 2-point conversion, that's a win right there. Or even if they just put that Jacksonville game away, if it never goes into overtime, if they just took advantage of all of the things that they had leading up to OT that could have helped them win that game, that's a win right there. And then, I mean, come on. The Denver Broncos averaged 25 points, almost, I want to say 26 points a game going into that matchup against the Raiders. The Broncos did. They averaged nearly 30 points a game. The Raiders held them to 10 points and lost. I think that Broncos game was a microcosm of the season. And really, if you really look back at it, I think it was a microcosm of the last couple of seasons for the Raiders, in the sense of, you know what you're getting. The offense is gonna sputter. The offense is gonna try to find their way. The offense is gonna struggle, and the defense is gonna do all they can to hold as long as they can and as long as reasonably possible. I think that's what happened, if you ask me, against Jacksonville. Yeah, the defense gave up a ton of points in that fourth quarter, but they had only given up 2 field goals in the first, second, and third quarter combined in the Jacksonville game. 2 field goals. And then they gave up, I want to say, 17 points in the fourth quarter. And I want to say, obviously, that touchdown in OT. I think that shows you, right? They can hold 3 quarters of the game. But what defense in the league is going to hold for 3, 4 quarters every week while the offense doesn't really do anything? And that's not me saying it. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. That is me saying it, but even the Raiders are saying. I mean, Adam Butler said it this week in the locker room, right? He said, "Hey, it's frustrating when you do your, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said it's frustrating when you do your job and the other side of the ball is not doing their job. That's not from me. That's from your starting defensive tackle. Okay, so it's clear that the defense is doing their job enough to win the game. I'm not saying the defense is perfect because they're not. They give up touchdowns, they give up scores, but when you look at it in terms of complementary football, the defense is doing enough to win games. They did enough to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. They did enough to beat the Chicago Bears. They did enough to beat the Denver Broncos. That's 3 wins right there that are now losses because the offense didn't hold up their end. And this is not to point fingers, but this is complementary football, right? And football is the ultimate team game. We all love football because of the team aspect, because of the team camaraderie, but the team has to do their part. The team has to do their part. And right now, in the last couple of weeks, really the last couple of seasons, that has not been the case for the Raiders. And again, as frustrating as it is for everyone to watch, I can only imagine what it's like for those guys to go through it and live through it and practice as hard as they do every day and put the work they put into it, only for it to go sideways off of a couple of plays. There's a human element to this, right? This is bigger than just watching guys put on a helmet and shoulder pads and watching them run around the field. No, these guys, they train, they work hard, they put in work throughout the year. And then again, to watch all of that work come down to maybe 3, 4, 5 plays every Sunday and it doesn't go your way week in and week out, that's frustrating. And I don't care if you're a football player, I don't care if you go into the office every Sunday if you're a construction worker or anything in between, for you to prepare as long as these guys prepare, as hard as they prepare, and for it not to pan out over and over and over and over again, that's frustrating. So the Raiders have to figure it out, right? They're professionals. They're getting paid big money to figure this thing out, and that's what they have to do. Really starting from the top down. Now, again, in terms of the Cowboys and the Raiders, in my opinion, I think the Broncos game is proof that this is more about the Raiders than really anybody else. I mean, the Broncos are one of the best teams in the league. They have one of the best records in the league, and the Raiders still almost beat them on on a short week. And I think that goes to show you that anything is possible. And I honestly think it goes to show you that the Raiders, listen, guys, I don't want to say they're not far away, but they're just a few strokes of luck away from being a lot closer than what their 2-7 record may appear. And I think that's fair to say. I think anybody that's looking at this very middle of the road, I mean, come on, guys. Listen, I don't care if you go to 5 Super Bowls in a row. If you go 5 out of 6, like the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe they did. How many ever you go to, you need some luck. Yeah, right. You need luck in this game in the NFL. You need luck living in Las Vegas, and the Raiders have had not a whole lot of it over the last couple of years. And sometimes you need the ball to bounce your way, right? For the ball to bounce your way, there's no rhyme or reason for why it does or doesn't bounce your way, but you need the ball to bounce your way. And the Raiders have not had the ball bounce their way that often in the last couple of years. With that said, they have to take some things into their control, into their power, and make the best of it, right? Now, with that said, the trade deadline just passed. So in terms of this season specifically, there's only so much that they can really do. And they have to make the best of what they can do. Now, that brings me to another point of Pete Carroll, this Raiders team. They have experienced, and I've said this in writings a couple of times. They have experienced more significant injuries than last year's Raiders team. Now, if you're comparing 2024 and 2025 Raiders team, last year's Raiders team, those guys, I mean, there's a high number of injuries. 10, 12, how many ever it was? It was a ton of people that got hurt. This year's, there's less injuries, but the injuries have been happening to more important players than maybe, arguably last year. And I really don't even think it's arguably. I mean, Brock Bowers goes down, JPJ goes down, Colton Miller goes down. I'm not sure that they really experienced any injuries like that last season. They just experienced more injuries. So with that said, the reason I bring that up is because if you're looking at this year versus last year, the Raiders this year have lost 7 out of 8. games. Last year, those Raiders, they lost 10 in a row. This year, in terms of the 7 out of the 8 that they lost, the one win out of that 7 out of 8 came against the Tennessee Titans. If it wasn't for that, they might be on an 8-game losing streak right now. I say that to say that they're not necessarily that much different than last year. So the same way that Antonio Pierce was tasked with figuring out how to make the best out of a bad situation, Pete Carroll, the more experienced coach, the more winning coach, the guy that has experience on the professional level, collegiate level, won championships on both levels, he now has a similar task as the rookie head coach, if you will, as Antonio Pierce was last year, the same task that he has. Let's hold him to the same standards, right? And again, is it unfortunate? Yes, that these injuries have happened to the Raiders and that they happened early, right? Brock Bowers got hurt in the first game of the season. JPJ got hurt, I want to say, in week 2. The injuries happened early. They were big injuries, but still, you brought Pete Carroll in to have him steer this ship the right way, win, lose, or draw, injuries or no injuries, and this is it, right? They didn't just bring Pete Carroll in case everything goes well. That's not why Pete Carroll was brought in, if you ask me. I think part of the reason Pete Carroll was brought in was in case this does not go well, in case injuries do happen. And that's where they are right now, and Pete Carroll has to figure it out. Now, luckily for him and the Raiders, they still have the second half of the season to get this going in the right direction. Do I think they make the playoffs? I don't. Not with the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Broncos. I mean, the Raiders are in a similar situation as last year, where 3 teams in the division might make the playoffs, right? So do I think they make the playoffs this season? No. But the other side of that coin is that most people didn't think they would, right? So we've had realistic expectations this far. Them making the playoffs or not making the playoffs, that's not the metric that they were graded by, that anybody was prepared to grade them by heading into the season. What everyone wanted to see was progress. And I think had they been fully healthy, we would have seen a lot more progress than we've seen. But I think I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think I can speak for myself. Personally, I wanted to see progress even if there were injuries, right? Outside of a Max Crosby injury, outside of injury to your starting quarterback, I wanted to see progress even if there were not, or even if there were injuries, because there were injuries last season and we wanted to see progress. I wanted to see that this year too. Now, the last couple of games, you could argue that there has been progress, but I'm not sure that you could, right? I think the offense is still struggling. I mean, you're paying Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly's the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league. Now, that's easy. That's low hanging fruit to pick, right? Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, he has to do better. They have to do better. It can't just be we have injuries and this is what you get, right? That can't be, not when you're the highest paid off not when you're the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league. You can't take that aspect or that approach to it. Now Chip has gone up and he said this, the correct things every week in terms of next man up, next man up, next man up. But the reality is that it's more difficult to call plays without your starting players, without your stud left tackle, without Brock Bowers being healthy, which he is now, but he wasn't for a lot of the season. It's more difficult to do that, but that is still Chip's job. And I think everyone has to remember that. So, for those guys for the defense to hold the Broncos to 10 points, and you scored 7 points early in the game and the rest of the game was just anemic, that's weird. That's questionable. It's questionable that Brock Bowers doesn't get a target. I don't need a catch. I don't need a touchdown. I need you to throw the ball to Brock Bowers one time in the second. I don't get it, and I understand that you can call your plays and the defense dictates where you throw the ball. Throw all that out the window. Brock Bowers needs a target in the second. I mean, imagine being a defender and you studied all week to figure out how to stop Brock Bowers, and then the Raiders line up for an entire third and fourth quarter, and Brock Bowers doesn't get a pass the entire second half. I mean, imagine being a defender. You have to kind of be like, what's going on, right? And I understand again, the defense dictates where you throw the ball, and I understand that the Broncos defense made it a point to eliminate Brock Bowers, but come on, I mean, the Broncos defense is good and they were bringing pressure, but hell, Pat Surtain wasn't even on the field, right? And you still couldn't find a way to even throw Brock the ball. I don't need Brock to catch it. I don't need him to. I don't need yak. I don't need yards after catch. I don't need touchdown. Throw the ball to Brock Bowers and just see what happens, right? Like even if it's an incomplete pass, the defense now has to respect it. So I say all that to say that Chip Kelly has to figure it out. He was paid the money to figure it out, right? That's not on accident. With the way they paid Chip that money before he even stepped into the scene, you have to deliver. And if you can't deliver because of injuries, I think most of us would understand. But 7 points against the Broncos when your defense was playing lights out. I mean, and you go down the line, how many games the defense has played as good as they could for as long as they could, only to get no run support from the offense. It doesn't matter what defense in the league you are. It doesn't matter what team name is on your helmet. If your defense is on the field for 30, 40 minutes a game, sooner or later they're going to give up a score, right? And if your offense can't score more than once a game, how much margin of an error, does your defense have? All right. So with that said, let's take a kind of turn, if you will, not so much, but a turn a little bit in the sense of let's give the Raiders defense more credit than I think that a lot of people do. Let's give Patrick Graham more credit than most people do. I mean, just on a very simplistic level, the Raiders have had three offensive coordinators in the last 3 seasons. They've had one defensive coordinator in the last four. I think that speaks volumes. I mean, year after year, the Raiders have routinely given Patrick Graham one of the lowest paid defenses in the National Football League. And if you want to look and say that, oh yeah, that one year they didn't in the last 4 years, it's because they were paying Christian Wilkins buku money out crazy money for him to play 5 games. You take Christian Wilkins out the mix and go look at where the Raiders defense stacked up in terms of highest paid. Now, you might say highest paid and lowest paid defenses, it doesn't really matter. You're right. It doesn't to a certain degree. But when you pay your quarterback $90 million and you pay Jimmy Garoppolo how much ever money you paid him, and you pay Chip Kelly how much ever you paid him before he ever called a play for your offense, it does matter how much you're paying everyone, right? So Patrick Graham getting the lowest paid, one of the lower paid defenses in the league every year, and he just makes lemons, or he makes lemonade out of lemons every year. Hats off to you, Patrick Graham. Hats off to you. And there's a lot, I asked Patrick Graham this week in terms of, how satisfying, or if it was satisfying for him to watch his defense perform the way they did against the Broncos. And he gave, again, these guys, they'll give you the right answer. He says, winning is the ultimate answer, is the only thing he's focused on. But come on. Come on. His defenses have been left out to dry year in and year out. Ezekiel Trezevan said that. Patrick Graham's defenses get left out to dry year in and year out by the Raiders offense. And while you pay your wide receivers and you pay your quarterbacks and you pay your running back, even Ashton Genty's getting, I want to say, what, $35 million, right? Your rookie running back, right? So all this money's getting doled out and your defense gets left out figuratively and literally and financially every year. And Patrick Graham just makes do. He puts his head down and he says, hey, all I want to do is win. Patrick Graham has to give you that answer. I'm going to tell you this. Help that defense out. Those guys need help, and they need help from the offensive side of the ball. The defense can only do so much. They can only give you so many stops. Those guys played lights out against the Denver Broncos. It doesn't matter if there was a block punt. They held the Broncos to 3 points. To 3 points. It doesn't matter if the Raiders offense goes 3 and out, 7 drives in a row. Raiders defense stepped up. Hats off to those guys. Hats off to those guys. And then, also hats off to them when it's not obvious that you should tip your hat to them. That Jacksonville game, those guys played great. The Raiders defense played great. Okay, they played great for 3 quarters while the offense couldn't figure it out, which has been the case, par for the course the entire season. They played great for 3 quarters, and then after being on the field for 35 minutes, 40 minutes, they wavered. Well, they're humans too. They're tired, right? So the offense has to sustain drives, and they're not doing that, and that is impacting the defense. So with that said, you're going to see more of the same, I really think, for the rest of the season. Until the Raiders figure out their offensive line situation, you're going to see and as much as you want to blame Geno and as much blame as Geno may deserve, a lot of this comes down to your offensive line. Chip Kelly can't call a play without the offensive line giving up a sack or a pressure, and now you're banking on Geno to make the right decision under pressure with no receivers or few receivers even getting open. Well, what do you think is going to happen? Right? Let's be realistic. Geno's got to block for himself. He's got to make the right pass. He's got to get open for the receiver. What do you want Geno to do? He's a human. Now, again, the other side of that coin is Geno has to do better. But that's easier said than done when as soon as you snap the ball, there's a couple of 300-pound defensive linemen waiting to take your head off. I mean, put yourself in Geno's shoes. You're the quarterback. There are 11 guys on the defensive side of the ball that have spent all week dreaming about taking your head off. And now your offensive line just let 3 of those guys through. Untouched. How would that like and now now he has to deliver the pass accurately on time under duress every play every week for 18. Like be honest with yourself, guys. Until the offensive line is fixed, what we have all seen from the Raiders is about what we're going to see. With that said, it's still on those guys. They're professionals. It's still on Chip Kelly in that offense to figure out how to at least help their defense out, which I feel like they were trying to do, which I feel like they did a good job of doing in terms of possession and time of possession. I feel like they did a good job, a lot better of a job against Denver in terms of the time of possession. Now the scoring wasn't there; they didn't get the points, but they helped their defense out in terms of holding onto the ball as long as they could, trying to run the ball and holding onto the ball and helping their defense out. So I think the Raiders offense has to do that. They have to find a way to take advantage of those opportunities when they're there. Those opportunities were there against the Broncos, and it's a holding call here. It's an offensive pass interference call there, and now it's 3rd and 15, and you're trying to figure out how to get a first down. And rinse, wash, repeat for 4 quarters, and now it's a 3-game losing streak, right? So there's a lot to figure out. I don't think the Raiders are as bad as their record says they are. But in the National Football League, in the words of Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are, and the Raiders are 2-7. They have to figure out how to not go 2-8, or at the very least look better, look improved while going 2-8. All anyone wants to see is progress. All anyone wants to see is to see that you have been working on your craft. We all understand injuries happen. We all understand that you're playing with your reserves at critical spots, but it is still on these guys to figure it out. It's not the Chip Kelly wasn't brought in to just work with the starting offense. I mean, he was brought in to work with the entire offense, right? Whether it's the starters, the second string, the third string, just the same as Patrick Graham is supposed to work with the first string off defense, second string defense, third string defense, and he still does a good job. Chip Kelly has to do the same thing. With that said, you all, thank you all once again, as always, for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I love doing this and just kind of, letting go of my Raiders thoughts, because I have so many Raiders related thoughts that go through my head from all different types of subjects that deal with the Raiders. So thank you for working with me, for spending time with me, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Talk to you soon.